This is just a presentation. We don't have a lab. This is just to give you a sense of what the WS policy is all about from conceptual standpoint. So what is and why WS policy, and then we are going to cover WS policy terminology, information model, and we are going to see examples of WS policy and processing model. So what is and why WS policy? WS policy is a specification that defines the syntax and semantics for service providers and clients to describe their requirements, preferences, and capabilities. Okay. So the service, the syntax provides a flexible and concise way of expressing the needs of each domain. By domain, I'm talking about particular functionality such as security, privacy, reliable messaging, and things like that. Okay. So as you are going to see later on, the WS policy just defines the generic syntax and semantics, and while this domain-specific feature will have their own WS policy specification describing the requirements and preferences of capabilities. So you're going to see later on WS policy specifying security requirement. That's in fact called the WS security policy specification. So WS policy spec is just defining the syntax and semantics that could be used by domain-specific policy specification. So we are going to see examples of that in a following slide. It also defines processing models for those policies that operate independently of the domains. Again, this is basically defining general syntax and semantics and processing models. Okay, so the operations we are talking about for processing policies are normalize, merge, and intersect. So we're going to actually see that in the following slide. So how WS policy is used. So a web service, through WS policy, a set of rules that must be met by client before it accesses the web service. So web service might say, so these are the examples. Okay, so the clients that access that web service check to see whether or not they can adhere to these policies. So web service might say that all messages has to be encrypted or signed in a certain way before it can communicate with me. Okay, so client that does not meet that policy requirement cannot access the service. Okay. Example number 2, web service has a policy requiring that every message has to have a timestamp. Okay, so these policies are going to be specified following the syntax specified in WS policy. Okay, and these policies are in fact specified in WSDL document. So when the client gets a WSDL document, that policy should be loud and clear in that WSDL document. Okay. All right, so let's talk about WS policy terminology. So policy is the collection of policy alternatives, and policy alternatives is a collection of policy assertions. Okay, and policy assertion represent a single requirement or capability. Okay, so for example, a policy assertion could be that a certain type of encryption be used in encrypting transmitted data. Okay. So let's actually, I'm going to actually show you example in the following slide. That's probably easier. I'm going to just skip this one for now. Okay, so this is a continuation of the terms. So policy assertion type is a class of policy assertions, and policy expression is XML representation of a policy. Policy object is an entity with which a policy can be applied. It could be endpoint, message, resource, or an interaction. Policy scope is a set of policy subject, and policy attachment is a mechanism for associating policy with one or more policy scope. Yeah, understanding this terminology is not really that important. That's the reason I'm just kind of speeding things up. Alright, so policy information model. Okay, so this is the picture that might actually give you a better sense in terms of how policy is supposed to be constructed. So this is an example. So this is the, as I said before, policy is a collection of policy alternative, and policy alternative is the collection of policy assertions. So policy is the biggest biggest element. So this is the policy, and then we have policy alternative. So we have policy alternative collection of assertions. So this assertion is individual policy assertions. So policy alternative, this one single box is policy alternative, and this another box is a policy alternative. Okay, so when we say here policy alternative is typically a list of policy alternatives specified, the policy actually assertions specified within WSO tags. Okay. So if you're seeing this picture, this single orange box, light orange box, represent one policy alternative, and this one represents a second policy alternative. And inside policy alternative, you can see set of assertions. Okay. Now the operators. So in this case, this one is the same thing as this one. So there is actually what is called the all and exactly one. So this is the operational model. So in this case, all means I need to have all of this. Okay. So and then, so what it means is they should have this as well as this. And then inside we have exactly one. So we can just pick and choose one out of these two. So we can choose assertion 1 and assertion 2. Same thing here. We can choose assertion 3 or assertion 4. So this is exactly the same thing as this. So we can say, we can just deselect the combination. Exactly one, meaning we're going to choose exactly one out of this. Any one of this is good enough. Okay? And so basically what you're saying is the combination of assertion 1 and assertion 2, assertion 1 and assertion 4. So there are only 4 possible combinations. So this is exactly the same as this. Okay. And you can also have WSP optional attribute. That means one or the other. So either, in this case, this is the same thing as this. So either you have this or you don't. Okay, so that can be represented with WSP optional. So as you can see, WS policy basically defines the syntax and operational model. Okay, operational model meaning exactly one and all. Okay. WS policy examples. So yeah, again, this is something that we have seen already. So we have a WS policy, then we have exactly one, which means we are going to take either this guy or this guy. Okay. Now when you're using all alternatives, all assertions inside that policy alternative needs to be met. Okay, meaning client has to meet that requirement specified within that all. So this is an example of WS policy used in security. Okay, so in this case, this security policy says I'm going to just read these things. This policy contains a single policy assertion, this yellow highlighted assertion, requiring the inclusion of certain security token. So if the web service's WSDL document includes this, then any client wants to communicate with that service represented by that WSDL document has to send this X.509v3 the certificate token. Okay. This is reliable messaging. So what it means is that this is a little bit off. Yeah, so what that means is that any client wants to communicate with this particular web service has to meet reliable messaging requirement. Okay, and in this case, the message has to be ordered. Okay, and has to use the addressing, and it has to actually use the reliable messaging. Okay, so we're going to actually play around with reliable messaging and security later on, and we are going to observe the WSDL document as well as SOAP messages that contains SOAP headers that are relevant to security and as well as reliability. Alright, so that's the end of the presentation. Again, this is just a presentation. We don't have a lab. Okay.